Let's turn to this final story. Mexico's President-elect Claudia Sheinbaum vowing to move ahead with reforms of the judiciary system. The announcement raising fears it will erode checks on the power of the ruling party. The peso making the strongest move in EM currencies as the US dollar heads for a fourth day of gains. Steve Englander of Standard Chartered joins us now for more. Steve, these are the worries that people have when it comes to EM. You worry about things like judicial reform. Steve, how important is politics going to be to emerging markets and more broadly to foreign exchange this year?
Well, it looks like it's getting increasingly important, in part because the market underestimated just how important and how big the shocks might be. MEX is getting pounded in part because it was everybody's favorite trade a month ago. So, if there were any long positions in the market, it was long MEX and short some low yielder, and then those positions have been unwound, and if they haven't, they're getting unwound.
But Steve, how much do some of these events, whether it's the election in Mexico, whether it's the election in India, whether it's the European Parliament, EU Parliament elections, how much of this just sort of underscores the preeminence of the dollar as a haven, despite some of the political dysfunction here in the United States?
Well, we have an election of our own coming up, but I'd say that the shocks that we've seen abroad kind of, make the U.S. election look, the differences look kind of relatively minor. I think that it will come into play, I think, later on as perhaps the, policy agenda of Trump and Biden become more clear and the divergences become clear, the implication of the elections become more clear. I know everyone sees that there's a colossal difference between them, but in terms of practical politics and practical policy, it's not exactly clear what one would do that the other wouldn't. I think that will become more clear as the election approaches. But we've had these massive shocks. With the euro, I think everyone kind of went in kind of complacent. Like European elections, that's like a headline that puts you to sleep. And, all of a sudden you find the, sort of the right wing sort of really picking up, and it has implications for what the EU can do as a bloc. It has implications for how the ECB has to respond. That has implications just because we don't understand how this is going to play out.
Unprepared. That is the word that I want to key in on, Steve. You're saying this just shows how unprepared markets were from some of these outcomes being more dramatic than expected, even though, quite frankly, a lot of these outcomes have been expected. Stephen, how unprepared is this market going forward to other potential political catalysts that could come down the pike at a time where we're coming off a pretty stagnant time, at least for some of the major currency pairs, and it has led to leverage and carry trades and all sorts of other things that could be unwound in the face of some sort of catalyst?
Look, I got to put on my nerdy hat. I think what happens, you have inflation that goes up a tenth, it goes down a tenth. You move the currency up or down a little bit. You have a political shock. It's like you go from one state of the world to the other. That's a much bigger shock. I mean, it doesn't happen that often, but when it happens, you have to sit back and say, wait a second, is this really kind of the marginal moves that we're seeing when CPI comes in 0.2 instead of 0.3, or is this like a big deal? And I think the market's, trying to digest whether this is a big deal.